On this episode of Who
question up. Yeah. Right now, we're at a constitutional crisis affecting the nation's capital, D.C.
You're a representative.
Right.
Gil's a representative. Now, you have a cool word before it, shadow representative. It sounds really cool.
We sound like villains, comic book villains.
If you had one statement, one quote, one message that you could leave to the next generation, what would it be?
Oh, I say this all the time. Take that job.
Well, there is a lot of craziness going on.
Yeah, what a time to be in D.C.
It is a crazy time to be in. I actually just got back last night at 5 a.m. I drove back home from Georgia. Representative, you're in Los Angeles right now. I feel like these are the two craziest places that you could be in the United States, considering everything going on.
Yeah, as far as I know, LA is also going through their own issues when it comes to National Guard and militarization of law.
Well, they backed away. They backed away from it, right? We had they sent Marines out here. They activated the National Guard, and they've kind of have pulled out and kind of gone away because they weren't doing anything but standing around twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah.
Well, it's gotten intense here in DC. Like overnight, I feel like it got really, really intense. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on for someone that might not be familiar with the situation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Damian, for even bringing this question up. Yeah. Right now, we're at a constitutional crisis affecting the nation's capital, D.C. Now, not being a state, people in Washington, D.C. sometimes don't understand what is impacted by that. Typically, when I first ran for U.S. Representative 4 or 5 years ago, the conversation began and ended with congressional representation, voting representation. We have a warrior on the Hill, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and people will always focus on what it meant to not have a vote. But since then, we've seen so many things in D.C. happen based off of us not being a state. The protections, the ability to vote our own laws without federal intervention, the control of our National Guard, and even our justice system. And right now, we have seen the President of the United States militarize the police, put folks on streets that aren't even equipped or qualified or even trained to interact with members of our community. And he's put the U.S. Capitol Police on the roads, DEA, just all these federal agents to kind of patrol. And it's been quite abusive. I mean, we're talking about folks who are uncomfortable by seeing Humvees. I was just at Union Station yesterday, and we saw someone get pulled over for having expired tags and being arrested for it. So just seeing the overall antagonization of Washingtonians, and just that another example of federal oppression, this time used by some of our officers and military personnel.
And something we've talked about on the show previously, Representative Cisneros, and you mentioned this, you can speak to it a little bit better since you have served our nation, is the fact that these people that are being unleashed on the streets aren't equipped to actually be doing the police activity that we're calling on them supposedly to be doing.
No, they're not law enforcement people, and they don't have that ability to kind of go out and arrest people. That's not what they're trained for, right? These are soldiers. It's a National Guard, right? They are trained to, as they say, defend the nation and attack. And you always have to worry, like when their reactions that their natural reaction is to, like, if they're being attacked or if they feel threatened, they're gonna fire. And so I think to put them in that type of situation. It's horrible. It's there. You said one thing, Oye, that I'm going to check into right now. I'm going to call my staff right after we're done here. That you said the Capitol Police has kind of been working with the president.
I feel like anybody and everybody, and as you said, Rep Cisneros, like the margin for error is so narrow. Some person on the street grabs into their pockets, or a couple officers move the wrong way, and next thing you know, there's a huge problem at hand. So I think it's a waste of our money. I believe that the unhoused residents are also being pushed around without a plan. And if we utilize those resources of paying those DEA agents or what have you, and put it into rapid rehousing or housing first programs that we've seen being used successfully in other states, we can really address root cause issues and change things for the better rather than trying to win headlines.
I think the other scary thing he's doing here in LA is that he's put himself in charge of the task force, the security task force for the Olympics, right? And so I don't know if now he's kind of using DC as his thing, right? Because he says he's going to get rid of all the homeless and move them far, far away. You know, who knows what the hell that means? But I think now people here in LA are kind of worried about that. Okay, is he going to go after the homeless here and kind of move them and put them in camps? You know, during the Olympics, just to kind of get them out of the way, right? You know, round them up and arrest them for just not having a place to live, and treat them like criminals for that reason. It's just bad what's going on here, man. And just because some guy named Big Balls got his ass kicked.
It's crazy. I mean, think about the AP Gov textbooks that are going to be written like 20 years from now. It'll be like, what caused the militarization of DC? Big Balls got his ass beat. And that's all that's going to be written. You're going to have to fill in that bubble on a test. It's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Certainly, man. It's tough. I mean, we've seen people get beat up all across the country. I mean, Cincinnati a couple months ago was a brawl where we passed the 2-year anniversary of the Montgomery boat brawl. But in D.C., because we're not a state, sometimes the president of the United States could thumb the needle on us where it can't be done in other areas. And I believe that Trump ultimately is using D.C. as ground zero of his plan.
Yeah. And I think something that you touched on a little bit earlier, which I really want to address, because I feel like, you know, we've heard the responses to what Trump is doing. You know, DC's crime rate has dropped, you know, year by year around 27%. It's hit historic lows this year. And so it's been framed as an action to respond to an increase in violent crime. To increase, you know, to the increase in crime broadly. We know that these solutions that are being proposed don't work. I mean, we have empirical evidence, whether that's here in the United States, whether that's other countries' prison systems and how they deal with criminal justice. Why doesn't this work? Why doesn't this approach work?
Well, first of all, D.C. is the most police jurisdiction in America. As I mentioned before, we have like 4 or 5 different jurisdictions or police on top of each other. And if more policing was the solution, we would have already had that because we're the most policed area in this country. It reminds me of what the U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro recently said when she was asked about root causes of violence. It's just she didn't care. And I believe that fundamentally that is the problem, right? When we're showing things that work like community policing or, you know, wraparound resources, and we have a president administration that's literally cutting these things while complaining about a city's crime when it's at our 30-year low, and ignoring other areas which are more dangerous, but in red states like Memphis, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana, or even St. Louis, Missouri, it really shows that this is really politics over people. And as you mentioned before, anybody who spends 15 minutes studying these things know what works and what doesn't work. And militarizing folks who should be doing other things rather than walking down Georgetown at night really shows you what really, you know, what's really happening right now and what the outcome of this could be.
Yeah, and that's the other crazy thing to me too. Like, if you're talking about where high crime, high propensity crime areas, George, what are you doing in Georgetown? Right? What is actually going on here?
Right.
I do think that this is the first step in a broader, you know, takeover of other cities, and I think it's really interesting. You bring up Memphis and you bring up these high crime. If you look at states that have the highest crime, they're typically red states. One thing that he said was that Baltimore. We can't even talk about Baltimore because Baltimore's crime is so terrible. That's not true. I mean, the Baltimore's mayor has done an exceptional job at dealing and responding to the accusations that, you know, crime has risen in these areas and responding to crime generally.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned before, the root causes of crime were some of the things that Brandon Scott actually addressed. And year after year after year, you're seeing gun violence goes down, you're seeing people go to college, and you're seeing the actual turnaround of a city because that's how it's done. And it takes resources, it takes funding, it takes an opportunity for our president to say, we'll give more to the working class and the middle class rather than gut programs for the wealthy and for the billionaires. So we see what the agenda is nationally. We see where the president is putting his attention to maybe hide from other scandals, as we know about. And I really, truly believe that he's going to continue using D.C. as a punching bag when he needs a distraction from some of the scandals going on in the White House.
Yeah, and we're happy to name the scandals here. The Epstein files, got to release them. We have a tradition now for the past 2 weeks, Gil, of just mentioning the Epstein files at least once per episode, just to keep the pressure on Donald Trump.
No, I mean, look, again, the man moves in distractions, right? He's trying he's always trying to distract from one thing from another. Right now, Epstein seems to be the biggest thing that he's trying to do, but he took this one little crime. Actually, I shouldn't say it's little, but he took this one incident and just kind of used this now as his excuse to try and get away from the story, right? And I don't think Epstein files has gone away, but now when I was looking up the paper the last few days, right? It's Epstein's files, not the headline, but it's the militarization of D.C., right, and activating the National Guard, and him kind of, federalizing the D.C. police force. And then even the one that kind of caught me off guard today and surprised was, I read something, and maybe you can confirm this, Oye, but that the D.C. chief of police is now cooperating and saying, he came out with a statement and said, we're going to cooperate with the with federal law enforcement. Is that true?
About yesterday, there was a memo that said MPD will now be partnering more with ICE. And as you know, this year ICE has been associated with grabbing people regardless of the immigration status, taking young people out of college campuses with the green cards because they spoke out about certain things in foreign policy. And DC residents are extremely upset about this. DC is a sanctuary city, and what we're seeing right now is a betrayal of our ideals. As a child of immigrants, I completely feel that I have to step up and say something. Earlier this year, we launched an immigration town hall that not only talked to folks who are concerned about this, but also brought immigration attorneys to the room, because a lot of people need immigration advice. And with this White House, the laws are changing, the policies are changing every week, if not every day, and some folks need that assurance. We may have to bring that again, because whether it's people's neighbors, coworkers, employees, immigrants really make the fabric of not only DC, but this country. And following up to today, Attorney General Blondie is actually trying to replace this very same police chief that announced that she will be working closely with ICE. So it really shows that we can't give a yard to this White House, because you give them an inch, they take a mile, and they're really coming for everything that makes DC what it is. And just like, as I said, elected officials, a child of immigrant parents, it's really important for me to speak out and make sure we do whatever it takes to protect the non-citizen residents of the city.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not even just those that are undocumented, right? But even people who are trying to do the right thing, people that have green cards, people have taken the right steps to try and remain here, are being threatened, by this administration, right? And so, I mean, DC is a multinational, international city, right, with people from all over the world. And, I mean, Stephen Miller is just a horrible human being, right? And he's the one who's kind of really pulling the strings on this. But, he must walk around D.C. and just kind of be in disbelief and awe to see so many people around there that don't look like him. And so he's got this thing that we gotta fix the situation, right? There's too many non-white people in the nation's capital, and so
they've done a mask off with the rhetoric too. I don't know if you've seen, he says we need to restore civilization. It's a threat to ours. We need to these are all they're not even dog whistles anymore. They're bullhorns. They're mask off. We're trying to we're being replaced and we're trying to fight back.
Yeah, it was the same thing that you kind of saw in L.A. right? It's the Ice Barbie came out and was we're saving the people of L.A. We're gonna make them free again and independent. And they were talking as if the city was on fire and everything was being burnt down, and I mean, it was so much worse. I mean, so many times worse when the Lakers won a championship. What was actually happening compared to what was actually going on at that time. But I mean, you would have thought it was 10 times worse. But I know now that's because that's part of their rhetoric, right? They're convincing, and I'm sure I haven't been around to watch Fox News recently, but I'm sure if I turned it on right now, that's what we'd be seeing, right? It's like images
Either
of
that or a My Pillow ad.
and crime and everything, and how horrible it is, and how Donald Trump is going to be the one to restore law and order in the nation's capital, right? When actually, when you look at the data, it's been getting better and better and better every year. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to look back to when I lived there, well, I live there now, kind of technically. Oh yeah, Southern California, LA area has always been home number one. But I went to college in DC. I went to George Washington.
Great
DC has
tie.
always kind of been like my. It's always been my second home, right? It's always somewhere where I would go back. Obviously now being in Congress, I live there. 4 or 5 days out of the year, or 4 or 5 days every week. Um, so it is my second home, right? And it's something that's very important to me. And I think, I think the man's coming after every place where I ever lived. So who knows?
It's crazy. I'm from Forsyth County, Georgia, which is a
Yeah.
very conservative town back in Georgia.
Yeah.
And I'll bring my friends up here because I go to GW,
Yeah.
and I'll have them come and visit me. And the one thing that they always say is, man, the streets are so clean in the city. Obviously, it can be improved. Don't get me wrong. There's
Sure.
always area, like you can always make things better. But
Right.
they always point out, regardless of who I'm bringing over here, like, hey, the streets are pretty clean. It doesn't seem like a very dangerous area. So it's really interesting that Donald Trump is now claiming that the streets are dirty. It's super dangerous. I don't think that that's necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes what authoritarians and fascists do, they want to discredit and dehumanize people before they drive them out. Whether it's the immigrant community, whether it's the lower income folks, whether it's the unhoused, right? And I think he's doing that with DC. But we're also seeing the considerable effort of Donald Trump thinking that he could run the district. We're talking about someone who bankrupted casinos.
Yeah.
Talking about someone who went bankrupt 7 times. I don't think he really is equipped to handle the sewage and the potholes and the trash collection of DC. And I think that it's easy to criticize somebody, but it's harder to kind of govern. And I don't believe that President Trump is really focusing on governing.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a hard time with his current job as is, and I think he should leave DC alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, historically, he's had a hard time with whatever job.
Everything.
Yeah, right. It's the House always wins unless Donald Trump is the House.
He's failed upwards. He's the only person I've ever heard that I've ever known that failed upwards.
That's a really good way to describe it, because it seems like every single time that he has failed, he's used it as an excuse to like say, oh, these people are against me, and then climb higher up. Just a lack of accountability, if you ask me. But going back to this chaos, Representative Cisneros, we were talking before we started filming that there was an incident actually at a Home Depot in Los Angeles, a tragic incident. If you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, in my district in Monrovia at the Home Depot there were, again, right, individuals just looking to make a better life for themselves, day laborers there that line up at the Home Depots like they do everywhere else in the country. And, I showed up and everybody kind of went scattered and running. And one man, I think, leaped on and ended up on the 10 freeway and ended up getting hit by a car. And it's just unfortunate he died. But this was all caused by ICE and what they did. And then they Homeland Security put out a statement saying, wow, we weren't pursuing this individual. But the fact that you showed up, right, you showed up is what made everybody scatter and run. So yeah, you did. They did cause it, right? And it's like they had the National Night Out, right, last week. Where it's a day to kind of police departments to go out and talk about, relationships and what they can do in the community and kind of show off to the community, what they have, everything from their police cars to police bikes and other things and stuff that they have. And so we went around the district kind of, every city that had one. I think we ended up going to 7 different cities, And I kept running into Sheriff Luna, who's the LA County sheriff here. But, we had just kind of like a quick conversation. And it was like, look, I don't mind them kind of actually going after the violent criminals. He told me, yeah, you're right. It's just unfortunate that the violent criminals, aren't, MS-13 people, right? Violent criminals aren't lining up at the Home Depot to get day labor jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
It's the same thing over here. They're in Georgetown looking for violent criminals. It's like that's not where the violent crime is happening. It's
the
wild.
crazy thing about that too, right? It's like, again, what we talked about, right? The National Guard's not law enforcement.
Right.
So they can't go and arrest people. They can't. What are they going to do if they see somebody, if they see a crime? It's not their role, and they don't have, the ability to kind of go in there and stop it and to do it, to make an arrest. So now you're putting people definitely in areas and things where they're not supposed to be reacting and doing things.
Yeah, no, I mean, it just makes, going back to this claim that we weren't targeting this individual at this Home Depot. You also weren't targeting the 15-year-old disabled student that you picked up outside and then, had a case of mistaken identity. Whoops, we weren't supposed to meet him. How is anyone supposed to know who you are targeting and who you aren't targeting when you're showing up, with your face covered, essentially with the order to pick up anyone that looks like they would be an illegal immigrant, which is anyone that looks like me or Representative Cisneros over there. So I'm saying if ICE shows up anywhere, I'm running.
Absolutely.
And I'm a citizen. I was born here. I'm getting out of there as quick as I can.
Absolutely. And in this year, there's two different changes that ICE had that targeted and really made the Latinx community uncomfortable. Number one, in the previous administrations, they had something called safe places, right? If you went to get health care, if you were in a school, or you're in a faith place like a church, synagogue, what have you, ICE were not allowed to go into those places. Those were safe zones. Now they're no longer safe. So if you're seeking health care, if your child is in school, ICE can come and arrest you. Secondly, they're now allowing things called collateral arrests. What that means is, let's say ICE comes to come grab me, but they see someone who they think is an illegal immigrant, they can go grab them as well. Previous years, you could only go after the person who you have a warrant against or someone who is, quote, unquote, a target for that in that case. Nowadays, they can round up anybody. And what that opens the door to is racial profiling, targeting people based off of what they look like or what they're wearing. And you're really, in my opinion, criminalizing poor people. You're really going after folks who are outside of the Home Depot or inside of a sandwich shop or working at a restaurant because they're easily identified as someone who might be an illegal. And we're seeing people who are arrested and their family members aren't even told where they're at. Yeah. Or they lose access to this person. They might be in Arizona when you think they're living in Maryland. And that is scary to people. We're talking about family members ripped from their siblings and their children and their loved ones. And that's not okay.
No, yeah.
It's just not okay. And it's very preventable, but we have a president and an administration that lacks empathy.
Yeah, well, it's very preventable, but unfortunately, it's intentional.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, right? I've heard reports that immigrants, at least so-called immigrants in California are being taken to Texas. And the immigrants from Texas that they rounded up are being taken to California and moved around intentionally so that family members don't know where they are, so that their attorney cannot communicate with them. And another, nuance here that I think a lot of people miss is that the immigration system is under the executive branch. It's not, the immigration courts aren't a judicial, part of the judicial branch. So whatever, Donald Trump sets up is the immigration standards. I mean, obviously there's some nuances, there's some caveats, but for the most part, whatever immigration policies he wants to put in, whatever he wants to say, kind of goes as I understand it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I call this legislative violence.
There you go.
Because we're attacking a community of people based off what they look like, where they live, literally what state they're in or lack thereof. This is legislative violence.
Yeah. I want to go back to what we started on a little bit, because we've actually never talked about this, Gil. DC statehood. I've never asked you about your perspective on DC statehood. I know there's a little bit of pressure on you now, but what is your perspective?
It's kind of interesting, right? And it isn't something that you really kind of like. Why did we the founding fathers, when they started it, right? Why did they want its own independent, city? It wasn't part of any state, right? And I think, I don't know if there's actually ever kind of been anything like George Washington said this. I mean, there's been a lot of kind of thoughts and things. I mean, a lot of it having to do with slavery in the South and the North, and nobody wanting the idea of, the North not wanting it in a southern state and the South not wanting it in a northern state. So let's make our own little independent kind of capital that's free of any state. But, I think that time has come and gone, right? So when I was in Congress the first time, I supported statehood. I think there are kind of areas there. I mean, obviously there's areas where people live, and there's obviously areas where the national government kind of takes place. I think there's ways to kind of divide that up. The capital, like for instance, where I work is, federal territory, but, Foggy Bottom should be part of Georgetown, the Navy Yard, and other places, right, should be part of, the DC state. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely support it.
Can you explain to me the argument against it? What is the argument against statehood?
Well, I think some people have political reasons why they don't support DC statehood. They see it as a left-leaning city, and they're concerned about the implications. I know historically they've added two states at the same time, whether they're free states and slave states or Democratic or Republican states, and I personally believe that DC will probably become a state in conjunction with another one. With that said, I think the biggest barrier to the fight for DC statehood isn't even political. I think it's awareness. I think people in Los Angeles, people in Georgia, if they knew more about what was going on in DC and how it actually impacts them if we were to have DC become a state, I think we'd be able to carry that conversation a little bit farther. I was in West Virginia about 4 years ago talking about DC state, the most reddest state in our union. And rather than just knocking on doors and telling people we deserve freedom, I actually asked the people in certain communities, Boone County, Wyoming County, what do you care about? And a lot of them told me about access to jobs, clean water, safer roads. And I talked to them about what I was facing in my neighborhood in Southeast Washington, D.C., and we were able to have better conversations and get closer and closer to what DC state could be. We're talking about representation who can vote on progressive policies that maybe their own representation isn't supporting, and how we can actually benefit the next state or the next jurisdiction compared to just focusing on the things that we talk about in the Beltway. So I really think platforms like this is really important, because we really need to move people all throughout this country about this situation, especially in today's climate.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Gil.
No, I was just gonna say, politically, I mean, Republicans are never ever gonna approve DC statehood just for the fact that until somehow it becomes red.
Yeah, somehow
Which
federal takeover will make sure that happens.
It's never ever gonna hopefully happen. But putting 2 more Democratic seats in the Senate, another Democratic vote there, it'll just never happen, right? And I don't know. I think they've always been afraid of Puerto Rico for the same reasons, even though they've had at times, Republicans representing Puerto Rico. I think the previous, now it's Pablo is the rep there of Puerto Rico, but before that it was a Republican. But they have internally to Puerto Rico, right? They actually have different political parties that the people actually kind of vote on more than it is Republican or Democrat, right? It's like Commonwealth, statehood, independence, and that's kind of what they campaign on inside Puerto Rico.
One thing I don't understand is when we're learning about United States history, I can. You already know where I'm going with this. When we're learning about United States history, we're taught that like one of the primary reasons why we left England, or one of the catchphrases, was end taxation without representation. You see it on the license plates here in Washington, D.C. Yeah. I didn't know this. D.C. residents pay I don't know if it's the most or if it's a significant amount of taxes compared to residents of other states.
Yeah, highest per capita.
States. Yeah.
But highest per capita, we served in the military, we fought in wars and died in wars, yet we returned back to second-class citizenship. So yes, you're right. We have those license plates that say taxation without representation, and we just need to keep that conversation going.
Yeah, and what do you think is the best way to make people more aware of it? Obviously, doing shows like this, but like, what's your argument for DC statehood to someone that like has never heard about this issue before?
Right. I think the important thing is that Washingtonians want the same thing that Maryland, Virginians, Californians, and people from Georgia have. We don't want to be treated anything differently. We want the same respect. We want to be able to pass our own laws without federal intervention. We want to be able to control our own budget and not have, members of Congress basically hold our money back from us, that $1.1 billion. We want to be able to live in communities that we elect our own leadership and not have it threatened by the president just for political purposes. We love where we live. We're not running to anywhere else, but we just want a little bit better for ourselves. The same thing anybody else has in this country.
Sounds like a great argument to me.
Thing.
Yeah, right. We just all want the same thing. And I think that's the perspective for like 99.9% of issues, like being completely honest. I think we all want a better life for ourselves. Exactly. We want a better life for our family. And I think that a lot of the times we get in these culture wars, we get in these issues that don't really pertain to most people, and we get caught up in them. I think DC statehood is the opposite of that. It's one of those issues where we should be talking about, treating individuals as second-class citizens and how we can get away from that. Again, the irony in teaching students that we, declared ourselves an independent nation because we were not being represented in another government.
Yeah.
I think is screaming. It tells
it's a
you something.
founding principle.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things we want to complete the American democracy by DC becoming a state. And that's kind of what I say oftentimes. It's kind of a tagline of mine, but we're really trying to complete the mission of our entire country's existence.
Yeah.
I think, I'm going to say this maybe because I don't think I'm that old, but within my lifetime, right, when I was born, only within my lifetime has DC actually been given the right to vote for president. I don't even think people really understand that, right? They just kind of nowadays, they probably always assume that, if you lived in DC, you always got to vote for president. It was treated just like any other territory, right? Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, Marianas Islands and so on, Virgin Islands. They don't get to vote in the presidential general election. And it used to be like that for DC too, for the vast majority of the life of the country.
Yeah, I had no clue that was the case. Another, I don't know the nuances, so maybe you guys can highlight them here. You're a representative.
Right.
Gil's a representative. Now, you have a cool word before, is shadow representative. It sounds really cool.
We sound like villains, comic book villains. So, yes, my role as the U.S. representative of Washington, D.C., but it's very much different than my colleague right here, or even the Congresswoman, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's our warrior on the Hill, as we say. The difference between me, typically, compared to somebody else who's in Congress, is my seat's not in Congress. My office is not in the Capitol. My office is in the City Hall building of D.C., which is called the Wilson Building. We don't have the full congressional staff, but we do have a lot of people on our team that really help us move forward. And being in a city, district, non-state, all in one, we definitely try to also get involved in the community and plug in some of those holes that our lack of statehood leaves open. For example, we have something called the Expungement Clinic, where we help returning citizens get their records cleared, give themselves access to employment and opportunities. We help businesses, mostly east of the river, mostly minorities, learn how to go to the government landscape of securing contracts, loans, grants, certifications to kind of level the economic playing field. And we go into classrooms, get young people interested in careers like this own or being a healthcare professional like myself to really try to have them seek professions that keep them in DC for the long term, because it's not getting any cheaper. But we understand when young people go to college, they're less likely to commit violent offenses, and they also can turn the economy of their household and their community.
Yeah. And on the opposite, I don't have the statistics here in front of me, but I do know that the probability of becoming homeless increases once you've been incarcerated once. Absolutely. I think it increases by four times once you've been incarcerated once. I think it's 13 times once you've been incarcerated twice. So going back to addressing these root causes,
sure.
How do you see the solutions differently than what the current administration is proposing?
Well, when it comes to public safety, I believe resources and opportunities make a bigger difference than over-policing. I think it's easy to spend money on officers and throw them on streets and count the arrests. But when you invest in opportunities for those who are just impacted to find a safer way to make a living, or young people to get them into college rather than throwing them into juvenile detention centers and trying to charge them as adults from a young age, you really see a community grow from within. That you don't have to gentrification is not so inevitable that when you want to develop a location, you can kick people out. If you develop the people as well as you develop the location, then people can actually stay for the duration of the renewal of their communities. And it's not easy to do. It's not sexy to do. But in the long term, your community benefits when you do the little things to make life just better every single day versus trying to win headlines and throw Band-Aids over big wounds.
Yeah, I think that, I was having an in-depth conversation about the situation in El Salvador, with CCOT and their approach to crime as well. And, I think that what a lot of people don't understand as well is that the response that the Trump administration is taking right now might decrease the numbers significantly very quickly. But what it does is it leaves a void. It leaves a void for the next generation that, we're going to have to respond to an increase in crime. It's the same thing that we're seeing in El Salvador. Right now, you're locking up grown men, you're throwing in, regardless of whether they actually are gang affiliated or not, you're locking them up under the veil of security. Well, come 10, 15 years from now, when these individuals are growing up in broken households, the propensity to commit crime increases a lot. We know this empirically, that, you're more likely to commit crime under those circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, this administration is just silly. I mean, they're charging a guy a felony for throwing a sandwich. And I hate it. It's like, come on, man. Like, the guy works for DOJ. He's got fired. They charged him with a felony because they want to look tough on crime. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, they're locking people up for having expired tags in their car. It's like, this is not what people signed up for. And I know Fox News is saying 60% of D.C. residents don't like the handling of the public safety and stuff like that. They're not asking for this.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like, this is not for D.C. residents. This isn't by D.C. residents. Any conclusion that's going to be made from this is fraudulent. And all they're going to do is continue to abuse the community. I mean, President Trump said he wants to extend this for longer than 30 days. And he's only been like 4 days in.
Yeah.
It has already been a waste of money. So to the Andy Ogles out there, the Andy Harrises, sorry, Rep Cisneros, like, focus on your own districts because D.C. is fine. We don't want you here. We don't want you handling D.C. business. And you can kind of kick rocks because none of this is ever going to work.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the unfortunate thing with the approach that the Trump administration has taken on a variety of issues. They say I'm going to use this as a hypothetical example. Yeah. People don't like homelessness.
Right.
And they say people don't like homelessness, and we're addressing homelessness by disappearing homeless people.
Right.
So therefore, people like what we're doing, and it's this false equivalency between one thing and the other. Representative Cisneros, another, place that Donald Trump has consistently attacked, whether it's for homelessness or for crime that we mentioned, is Los Angeles. What is your concern moving forward with the Trump administration? Do you think that the D.C. situation will lead to the Los Angeles situation getting worse?
Well, first let me say, right, I think when it comes to polls, right, you can make the polls say anything, right? And when you ask such a general question to people as especially in urban areas, do you want your communities to be safer? I mean, who's going to not say yes to that, right? So to kind of use that as your platform, as your reason as to why now we need to nationalize the DC police and bring in the National Guard is just idiotic and crazy. I think what is happening now in DC is just a replay of what occurred in LA. And I think it's just more reason for, people of color to be on the watch out, right? I think this is very racially motivated. I think if this had happened to a person of color, what happened to Big Balls, if it happened to a person of color, which happens all the time, right? There's been members of Congress who have been assaulted and attacked. Henry Cuellar was robbed. I think, Vicente Gonzalez was attacked, and got in a fight with somebody trying to mug him, before, right? No, there was no ever a thought to now we need to activate the federalize the DC police and bring in the National Guard when that happened. So I think, not just everywhere, I think everywhere needs to be watched, right? And I think everywhere, every person of color needs to be cautious and ready, right? Like you said, if you're somewhere and you're doing nothing, but all of a sudden they're coming in their raid, and I'm probably running too.
Yeah, and particularly, I think with the situation in DC, compared to LA, I think there are some parallels, but I also do think that there are some differences. Right. I think the minority communities being affected are different, obviously. I wanted to ask you about the racial component of what Donald Trump is doing here, because I think everyone understands, like, when ICE comes in, who they're looking for, who they're coming after. Why is what Donald Trump is doing right now also, I would say racially motivated, if you will?
It is racially motivated, and it's dangerous because it's creating bad relationships between the police and law enforcement in the community. As we were talking about National Night Out, it's a way for the community to kind of come together around police. And right now, we're seeing a fracturing of trust. We saw what happened with Black Lives Matter being painted over and ripped up, and we're seeing our Smithsonians being defunded, especially if they're addressing other cultures and minority history. And we're seeing the same thing in this. And this is additionally harmful to the communities because sometimes we have law enforcement who's trying to do the right thing, but they may be misrepresenting the law when they actually engage with people. I saw a video of two black guys sitting on their porch smoking weed, which has been decriminalized in Washington, D.C., and the DEA and like 12 or 13 officers come and start trying to talk to them about this, that, and the third, and they were giving unfactual information. Yeah. Now, what would have happened if these guys argued? What would have happened if these guys got up and ran? What would have happened if they reached into their pocket the wrong way? There's so little margin for error. It makes all of this that much more dangerous and not useful. And my biggest concern about all of this happening is, number one, it can happen over and over and over again. But number two, it puts DC in a different spot than Los Angeles, right? Unlike you guys, we don't live in the state. So the president has way more control over our lives than, say, anywhere else in this country. And it compromises our leadership locally. We have a mayor that's trying to work on a relationship with the White House, but the White House is a place of bad faith actors. We have a council that's trying to toe the line and not be too vocal against the White House. But in my role, I feel like I had to be, because the people of DC want a fighter. They want someone who's standing up to the authoritarianism in the White House, even sometimes in our local government. And right now, we're seeing sometimes more leadership from the streets than we do legislatively. And I think it's really important for DC to stand up, our elected officials to also stand up. But we do understand that the dangers against us are different than the dangers of other people that live elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on there, right? I mean, the big difference when you want to talk National Guard is, every state, the governor of every state is the person in charge of the National Guard. And, like, obviously, like, the president can federalize it. He's supposed to work in conjunction with the governor, which he didn't do here in California. But, the governor is supposed to be that person that kind of works with it. Works with the federal government, and they are supposed to get the permission, right? But in D.C., there is no governor. It's the president is the person in charge of the National Guard. And so his ability to activate, deactivate, to do what he wants, and this and there, whether it's within the limits of the law or not, are his. He doesn't have to go ask permission. He doesn't have to get the approval of the mayor or anybody to kind of do it. He can just do it, which is what he did. And the other thing, like you said too, right, you said earlier, is there is no city that has more law enforcement than D.C. I mean, there are so many different police departments there, right? You got the D.C. police, you got the U.S. Park Police, you got the Secret Service, and there is actually, I don't think people understand too, right? They don't know, there is an actual uniformed Secret Service that drive around in police cars. It's not just guys in suits protecting the president. But there's so many different things. I mean, there was I'm going to talk about we tell little funny stories here and kind of joke around on here too, right? But like I said, I went to college in D.C. and it was actually my last Friday out before we actually graduated on Sunday. I did Navy ROTC. I got commissioned on Saturday, but it was our last Friday night out. We went out, me and like some of my friends, and we're at the bar that we would typically hang out at. And a fight broke out, right? And then kind of there was actually an off-duty police department that the place hired to kind of get and kind of calmed it down. And then it just escalated again, and it turned into a big brawl, like on 21st Street off of Pennsylvania, and and it just kind of spread out, like went from the inside of the bar out into the street. And my God, I think every police department in DC actually showed up that night. I mean, the Secret Service, I think, was there. They would just happen to be driving by, and they stopped. So they stopped and got out, and then the DC police showed up, and then the Park police showed up, and it was just, I mean, everybody was there. I mean, it was like we called it. Me and my friends have named it. The name of the bar was called GG Flips, but it had a nickname of Odds, and so we called it Fight Night at Odds. So whenever we talk about that night and that event, we just say Fight Night at Odds, and we all know what we're talking about and what happened. But I mean, but it was just crazy to kind of see how many different DC police departments were there that night to kind of break up this fight that started at a bar.
Yeah, that's something that surprised me a lot when I came to DC was like, yeah, you have the Secret Service, you have the Metro Police, you have the DC Police, you have obviously on George Washington, you have the Campus Police.
Yeah.
And I was just like caught off guard, I guess, by how much police. And then there's like also every single building, it feels like, has their own special police, which I don't know. Do you know how that works? Like the special police force, is that like, and do they have actual like authority, or are they just like private security?
Hey, you'd be surprised. I feel like everybody's everywhere. I mean, like I get dizzy sometimes looking at what's what. So, I mean, just imagining now deploying the National Guard, I'm sure they trip over each other sometimes trying to get somewhere. So, I mean, it beats me.
Yeah, no, and seeing all the departments come out as well is crazy.
Yeah. So, Damian, I will say this, like the Pentagon, I was at the Pentagon, when I was at the Pentagon, and I didn't know this until I was there, but there's actually the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, which is the police department that oversees the Pentagon. Now, that's in Virginia, right? Right. But it is an actual kind of, they can actually write you a traffic ticket, like in the state of Virginia. But you're right, like every department has its own kind of police force and security force to kind of protect its building and its leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, the VA has a little kind of small police force right there as well.
I didn't know that. I did not know that the VA had their own police force as well. Wow, it seems like I see the pictures now. Obviously not funny, but like it's crazy to see like the back of police officers' vests. You got the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. You got all these different organizations, all these abbreviations, just pulling up to DC all at the same time, patrolling together. It's been very, very off-putting to like, again, going back to the fact that I bring my friends here often and they always compliment the city, compared to other cities that they've been to. They always mention that it's clean or that, it feels safer and whatnot. So just seeing like this overwhelming police presence, I think to your point, like it's just creating more chaos than it is actually solving.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's a lot of community groups rising up. The Free DC Project, Harriet's Wildest Dreams, a lot of unions. So there's a lot of policing, and then there's counter policing, and it's not even the faces that you would expect. I mean, people from all across this city, it kind of brought people together in a way. People from different communities coming together to protest against new law enforcement. So thank you for that, Donald Trump. Yeah. You know how to bring DC together in ways politicians can't.
He's doing that to communities all over the country.
So, but yeah, it's creating a chaotic scene because people are outside all throughout the day filming DEA agents patrolling Union Station. I mean, there's an organization called Flare that's right outside Union Station. They've been out there since May, just talking about President Trump and how he needs to go. But this week has been a surge of energy. People coming around, they're filming officers going around and just community watching the police now. So you have community policing watching the police.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this drastic measure.
No, this is a ridiculous situation. Now, Gil, I do know that you had a cutoff at 6, I believe. I don't know if we've gone over that yet. Don't have my clock on me. But if you do have to go, we'd love to continue the conversation with you, Rep Oye, if you have more time.
I'm here.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for having me again, as always. And, we'll talk to you later. But thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks, Oye, for being on the show.
Time for a quick message from our sponsors.
This episode of Who Dem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our elected officials is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. I wanted to go back to, we were talking about Black Lives Matter Boulevard. I don't want to give away our location here, but, we're not too far away from Black Lives Matter Boulevard.
Right.
It was crazy. I'm walking past it one morning, and they're starting the demolition. I walk past it like 2 days later, and they're done. I've never seen a construction project get done so quickly as that one.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because Black Lives Matter Plaza came down, I believe, in 2020 or so, right? Fresh after the George Floyd situation. Our country rose up for racial equality in policing, and that was seen as a huge moment in D.C. history. So to see congressional Republicans force our mayor into removing it, threatening federal infrastructure dollars, is just an example of Congress needling us and pushing their thumb on the scale to make us do what they wanted to do. And the concern was when the mayor acquiesced, did it, said it was part of her plan, she may have made a calculation and that may breed less intrusion. But what we saw is that inch becoming a mile to where we're at now. And people are now seeing that seeing capitulations may not have worked in our favor. And I'm concerned that there will be no end to this. So we have to stop now. We can't give another inch, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that even if Black Lives Matter Plaza is gone, that our memory of what led up to it and our fight for racial justice doesn't leave too.
Yeah, and another place where there's been a lot of capitulation, two places, the media with like CBS and ABC and whatnot, but universities across the United States, particularly here, GW, dealing with the protests and whatnot that were going on, and with respect to the situation in Gaza. Sure. You saw the school capitulate a lot to, Republican demands at the time. Obviously, Biden was, in office at that moment, but they were capitulating to a lot of Republican demands. And now we're seeing the Trump administration come in, and it wasn't enough. They want more. So what is your concern with this situation? Like, what is the worst that you think that this situation could get here in D.C.?
Well, it will never be enough. I mean, we have a president who's threatening our home rule, which allows D.C. residents to vote for their own mayor, vote for their own council, vote for their AG. I mean, we saw my colleague earlier talk about how we weren't able to vote for president. Less than 50 years ago, we weren't even able to vote for our own mayor. We never had local representation before the 1970s. So that's something that I know President Trump is threatening. I know they have a bill called the Bowser Act, bring oversight to Washington, safety every resident, which is literally the backronym of our mayor's name to remove our home rule. And I believe that is their final destination, but we have to fight back. We have to let people know what's going on, and we can't let the conversation of Washington, D.C. just rest in Congress, rest in the Senate, and rest in the White House. D.C. is full of over 700,000 Americans that want equality, and they want to be able to vote for their own local representation. But on campuses, I mean, we are seeing the pressure that this administration is putting on our university campuses, our TV stations. We are seeing Elon Musk's owned Twitter, or now called X, really algorithm push conservative values in all of our faces and making that far right the mainstream. And we just have to stand up regardless of the consequences. You talked about 10, 15, 20 years from now where they're going to be writing about us, and they're going to want to know who stood up and who didn't.
Yeah.
And right now we have a lot more people not standing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is going to, one thing that has been coming into my mind, with schools starting back up is I think that's going to be a big problem for this administration because historically speaking, the people who have spoken up first have been those that are on campuses.
Absolutely.
I want to transition here to a little bit of your background.
Yeah.
So pharmacology is, I believe, the name of the major that you got, or what's the technical term here?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I'm actually a doctor of pharmacy, and growing up, I knew exactly what I wanted to be.
Sure.
I want to be an NFL running back, right?
Okay. For what team?
St. Louis Rams was my first team I liked. When they were back in St. Louis, right? My older brothers were stars on the football team. I was 5 years younger than my younger brother. No, I was 5 years younger than my middle brother. So I watched them excel in high school, and I knew it was going to be my time. So when it came to my time and I didn't play, it became a problem. I went from running back to left out, right? And if you guys know football, the running backs are always the ones getting dirty and stuff like that. And my parents came to watch me, and I'm like, I didn't play. So my dad's like, you don't need to take a shower. Just get in the car. So that was the end of my football career. Yeah. So then I wanted to be an engineer because it sounded cool. And I did summer camp in engineering. I did physics, and I didn't like it. So I'm in 10th grade going to 11th grade. Tell my parents I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. And I don't know if you know too much about Nigerian parents, but they weren't too thrilled. Like, how you 16? You don't know what you're going to do with the rest of your life, right? So I had my midlife crisis at age 16. And my mom was like, you will know by the end of the summer what you want to be. Yeah. So she dragged me to a lot of her friends, and I found pharmacy. I like talking. I like to know more about medicine. And I stuck it through. So I went to pharmacy, did a 6-year program at Northeastern University in Boston, and graduated my PharmD.
How do you think that background informs what you do today?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, being a scientist makes you have a hypothesis, but you need to find evidence before you make your conclusion. And I think that sometimes in office, some of my colleagues find their own conclusion and try to derive whatever evidence fit that narrative.
They work backwards.
Absolutely. And not only is that wrong, I also believe that it could be dangerous because a lot of our elected officials speak very confidently. But when you're confident and wrong, that's when you mislead a lot of people. So not only have I approached scientific method into the work that I do, I've also tried to convince other healthcare professionals, especially pharmacists, nurses, healthcare workers, to really consider running for office. I think we are some of the most trusted professions, and we literally make a living off of helping people. And when people have such a high or low threshold of trust in their elected officials, I believe as healthcare professionals, we deserve to give our communities a better option in terms of candidates.
I would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. We need better candidates running.
Absolutely.
I want to give you some words, and you tell me the first thing that comes to your mind, or some phrases or something.
Yeah.
Affordable Care Act. What do you think?
I think it's not enough. I believe we need universal health care, a Medicare for all policy, something that almost every other industrialized country has. Healthcare is a human right at the end of the day. And right now, we have a business-driven healthcare system that puts people behind based off of what they look like, where they live, or how much money they have.
The jab.
The vaccine?
I'm framing it as the jab, so I want to see your response to that.
I mean, historically speaking, the reason why people are living to be 60, 70, 80 years old and not dying at 10, 15, and 20 years old is because of vaccines.
Yeah.
Now, especially during the pandemic, we all needed to be vaccinated because it's not just your business anymore. Someone having COVID can impact other people, especially those who are older. And people who are older have the same right to live as I do. And I think it was important for all of us to kind of step in, get vaccinated. I'm concerned with the politicization of healthcare, of vaccinations and whatnot, because we're seeing the measles spread in Texas. We're seeing people getting diseases that used to be eradicated because of vaccines happening nowadays. And right now, the last thing we need is people to be skeptical about science. Yeah. We spend a lot of money. People get a lot of degrees for this stuff. And I do believe we should trust science and not just trust what's happening on X by Trust Me Bro Science.
Yeah.
There's no degree in Trust Me Bro Science.
No.
And I think it's important for us to really trust the experts.
Yeah, I would agree. I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson actually talk about this the other
he's
day.
good.
He's so good. I mean, he's good at anything that he talks about. But, I hadn't really thought about it like this. He was talking about how it was the medical advancements, vaccines, pharmaceutical drugs, all of these things that have actually extended the lifespan of people. In the 1800s, it was 35 years on average.
Right.
And he said this, and this is what surprised me. Everyone was eating organic back then.
Yeah.
And you hear that claim a lot where it's like, oh, if you just eat organic, you'll live to be whatever. The truth is, like you're saying, that maybe that plays a part, but what has played the greatest role have been medical advancements.
Right. And it's usually the people who've taken advantage of a system that complains about it, right? Like the Congress members who complain about the COVID vaccine got the COVID vaccine, right? The people who can say that everyone doesn't deserve healthcare have healthcare, right? The people who complain about, young people don't deserve student loan forgiveness probably didn't have student loans when they graduated from college. Yeah. So we also have to use a little bit more integrity and be more honest about one's own background when you bash things.
RFK Jr.
That guy. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think he needs a crash course of health science. I think he, we're talking about DEI. I don't know how qualified he was for his position. But then again, I don't think Donald Trump had really good options this time around. Not a lot of people want to work with him, and I don't believe he wanted the best people working for him either. Yeah,
the people he's put in his administration are crazy. He has Dr. Mehmet Oz there as well, and it's like, guys, Dr. Oz, not a real doctor.
Right?
Just objectively true. It's wild to see how this administration has, taken advantage of, because I think there's fair critiques of our institutions.
Sure.
And I think they've taken advantage of those critiques of our institutions to justify unjustifiable things, in my opinion.
Yeah, they went from complaining about the swamp to being the swampiest creatures. I mean, you're accepting $100 million planes and trying to convert it into a library, property to the library, so you can keep it at the end. I mean, we're seeing the president freeload off of any opportunity and steal from the remaining opportunities. And, I think that it's going to take a long time for this country to recover from a lot of the damage that this president is causing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, the last 8 months have felt like 8 years. You know how presidents get gray and stuff from the beginning to how Obama looked really good to the end, looked like Morgan Freeman? I'm going through that process right now in 2025.
I feel like we're all going through it right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Lord have mercy. And to be honest, I think I think it's going to take a long time for us to recover, but everything we do right now helps us in that recovery process. Not abandoning our green goals of preserving our planet is very important. Right now, our city is allowing every stadium to be built to almost skirt away from those green standards when those are some of the biggest pollutants there is. And I think it's really important for us to keep our minds on the big picture, right? Like, we can't rob our planet anymore. We cannot steal from our tomorrow's generation anymore. And I think it's really important to have that balance and be willing to sacrifice on some of the fancy things that we want right now for what our children and grandchildren are going to need.
That reminds me, I've been podcasting now for 6 years. I started on a show called Polititeen that I started with one of my friends back home. Word. And the idea behind the show was to give young people the opportunity to voice their opinions on politics. Because I feel like usually when you're turning on Fox News, CNN, you're not seeing a 20-year-old sit down and talk to you about these issues. You're having older people talk about these issues. And I think that there's a void there that needed to be filled. And on that show, we would end every single show by asking one question. I haven't asked this question in years, so I'm going to see if I still remember it. But I think that you'd be the perfect person to answer it. If you had one statement, one quote, one message that you could leave to the next generation, what would it be?
Oh, I say this all the time. Take that jump. I'm going to tell you how I got into politics. I never grew up thinking I was going to be a politician. Like I told you, I thought I was going to be a star running back. And I went through all these different things. I was really involved in the push to get drugs off the street, right? Like, pharmaceutical drugs that lead people into addiction. And the number one source of unused medication, or the number one source of medications that end up on the street, are the unused medications in the house. It's not from the hospital, it's not from the pharmacy, it's not from that drug dealer. It's the pain meds that you no longer need because you're okay, or somebody having stock full of Adderall that's grabbed from them. I testified before the council. I wrote in the Washington Post, and I was having a lot of momentum having this conversation. Somebody told me to go to something called an ANC, an Advisory Neighborhood Commission meeting, and I reached out to the chairman of that commission. I won't say his name, Anthony Muhammad, and he told me that you can come and speak. So I get there, I laminated, it looked really nice. I spent a lot of money, went to Staples. It was real good. I was really excited. And this said chairman, who I didn't mention before, Anthony Muhammad, came up to me and said, "You can't speak. I don't want you to say anything." Allegedly, I don't want to get sued, right? So I prepared really well. I was really excited to give this presentation. I laminated about 30 copies of this thing, and I didn't have my chance. I wrote the day on this, so I couldn't use it another day. So I was really mad. I went to the back of the room, and I talked trash about all the commissioners, about how unprofessional they are, and all these things. And somebody said, "If you're so much better than them, why don't you run?" And the immigrant child in me, I thought that they would just tell me what to do. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And new to the neighborhood, never ran for anything before, didn't know up from down when it comes to politics, but I knew to knock on every door. So I just started knocking and knocking and knocking. And you're talking about a guy with a name that most people can't pronounce. In Southeast Washington, D.C., we won that race by 1 vote.
Wow.
1 single vote.
Wow.
And when you win a race by 1 single vote, you remember every conversation you've had.
Yeah.
You remember every promise you've made. You remember how hard you worked. And we apply that to elected office since then. Now, had I not taken that jump, had I not taken that opportunity, this wouldn't be possible.
There you go.
And there's so many people that are afraid of failing, that are afraid of what people will think about me, not trying to stand out. They never take that jump. A couple years later, I run for the U.S. representative position, and we won, right? And people saw it as an upset. People saw it as, how did this guy come out of nowhere and win this seat? Until this day, there are people that told me if they ran against me the first time, they would have beaten me. My response is run against me now. Right? Yeah. You never want to be that person that shoulda, coulda, woulda. You want to be that person that did it. Because even if you don't succeed, you will learn something that'll carry you forward. There was one guy I read about one day, that really smart guy from Harvard University, moved to Chicago, was really bright, thought he can change the world, ran for Congress, and got obliterated by Bobby Rush, right? Destroyed, right? He was downtrodden, talked to his friends, maybe was going to be out of politics because he ran once, community organizer, didn't do it again. One day, there's a state Senate position that opens up. He decides to run for it, right? He challenged other signatures off the ballot. So he was the only one that was in the race. I think that's how it happened, but he ended up winning. A couple years later, he decides to take the jump for U.S. Senate, right? He was going to go up against somebody who was an overwhelming favorite. He ended up having his own scandals, dropped out of the race. Guy ended up running against Alan Keyes. A couple years later, spoke at a DNC in 2004 in Boston, Massachusetts. 4 years later, he's the president of the United States, Barack Obama.
Wow.
So sometimes people are so afraid of losing that they never run, or they lose their first race and never run again. But here is somebody who was probably the most decorated politician, especially black politicians in American history. His political career started with a loss, a bad loss. Yeah. And today, Bobby Rush is still in Congress doing this thing. But if you're afraid of taking that jump, you can never get to the stars. You can never get to the moon. You can never get to the sun. And life is too short to be afraid to take that jump. So I know that was a longer answer than you expected, but I tell people, even if it's not politics, if it's a young woman who wants to get into a science career, take that jump. Find a mentor. Email somebody. You have so much access to information and people with your cell phone that I wish I had when I was your age. Yeah. And I'm not telling you I'm 35. But more importantly, it's just so much access you have that taking that jump helps you land somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was that the first step is always the hardest step. And I really have learned that. It is that first step. It's actually doing it that first time, taking that leap. Yeah. Everything after, kind of falls into place when you really do take that first jump, or it doesn't, and you figure it out afterwards, but you're never going to know that if you don't take that first step. So with that being said, from running back to running for office, I love that.
Hey,
I love that.
Can I take that?
You can, anytime. Yeah. I might have a 10% little commission on there. No, you can absolutely use that. I appreciate you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Any time that you want to come on, genuinely, this is one of the greatest conversations I think we've had in the 20 episodes that we've done. Yep. Amazing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Wrapped up. Perfect. Bada bing. All right.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.